My guest today is Stephen Byrd. Stephen and I got to know each other when we worked together for the same apartment developer. He's a commercial construction project manager who manages multiple $100 million plus construction jobs at a time. He's a true professional and well respected in his field by both his team members and the trades he employs to build his projects. He's passionate about servant leadership and relationships, and it shows in successfully delivering projects on budget and on time. Our conversation covers a wide variety of topics to include construction, overcoming challenges, growth mindset, abundance versus scarcity, the power of thoughts, leadership, setting expectations, building relationships, and much more. I hope you enjoy my candid conversation with Mr. Stephen Byrd. Stephen, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming over and being on the show. It's been a while, and always enjoyed talking to you. So
we've had some good ones.
Yeah, and we actually never sat down like this and had a conversation. Really, I mean, it's always been through work. So I'm excited to do this with you.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, man. Appreciate the invite. Excited for you to kind of grow this, and I think the future is bright, man. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, let's get going then. What's something I need to know about you to understand the path you took in life?
Yeah, that's a open-ended question. I would say, something about me is just, I've come from situations where I've never really had anything given to me, right? So to me, with that, I feel like I've had to put in work that maybe some people wouldn't have to or haven't had to, right? So, my journey has been from the bottom to where I am right now. And it's empowering, but it also kind of gives you some real perspective. So that's, the foundation for me is my spiritual foundation, and, understanding that, it's all up is, kind of my mindset.
You started out in the industry in framing, right?
I started as a laborer, so I was
high school?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I grew up on site in a lot of ways, working with kind of some family friends and stuff like that. So, I mean, as an adult, young adult, I was picking up trash on job sites, man, so I was fortunate to have some people that saw some potential in me. And I always say they gave me a hand up and allowed me to keep learning. And I think, as long as you keep learning and seeking that progress, it'll manifest.
Was construction something you're always interested in, or was it just kind of an opportunity and you took it and grew?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was just a job. You know what I mean? It was just a job, and it was just something that, was accessible. And yeah, I mean, it really wasn't. I never thought of it as a career until, later in my 20s, and, just, I could really do something with this. It was just a job, man. It was, I like doing other stuff like everybody else. And yeah, I mean, it just grew on me, man. For me, the industry ever changing, there's always something different, something new to learn, and my brain just kind of works that way. So I'm always looking for something to learn. So it just kind of naturally kind of tapped into that.
Yeah, I know when it comes to starting at the bottom, that overcoming challenges, that usually ends up being our strengths. So what would you say some challenges were that you overcame that became a strength?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a lot of situations, especially when I got into the construction management side, I think, I had to overprove myself, whereas, people would ask me questions that they wouldn't ask anybody else, or, ask me to create a level of documentation that they wouldn't ask from other people in my same position. And I mean, I still encounter that today, to be frank, but to me, that sharpened me up and made me get to the point where I could really rely on my skills confidently, rather than, kind of floating by. Like I haven't had the opportunity to float by. I get questions asked of me that weren't asked of others, and it was very noticeable. And so I had to overperform in order to just even stay in my seat in a lot of ways. And that just kind of fueled me to continue to learn and get better, and understanding where my weaknesses were, and doing my best to strengthen those up, because I wasn't getting the benefit of the doubt. And I knew that if I exposed a weakness, they were going to plunge the knife in, right? So, kind of shoring up the chinks in the armor, and, allowed me to be stronger, and just specifically like understanding that I wasn't going to get those those kind of benefits of the doubt early on made me kind of drive harder to make sure that I knew what I was talking about and that
Hmm.
I could explain it and document it properly.
Yeah. I know for me, like, struggles early in life have, they're the things that I'm most grateful for now
Yeah,
is
agreed.
is becoming like, oh, I had to overcome that, and now that is obviously my strength. And so I feel the same way as
Yeah, I mean, when you're coming from certain positions in life, right? And that's the beauty of the American dream. It's not perfect, but it definitely allows you to grow if you put in the effort. I'm a testament to that. I think, a lot of that gives you a fearlessness, right? When you've gone through the fires and you've seen those things and you've bumped your head a few times and came out the other side and had some real struggles and challenges. And, I like to use the analogy of like, hey, man, you don't really know what a fight's like until you get punched in the mouth, right? So
mm,
once you've been punched in the mouth, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right? So to me,
mhm.
kind of what I would,
Yeah,
you
things
know,
are often more scary than in real life. Our
ex-
imaginations are wild in that way.
exactly. Their imaginations are wild. And, once you get to the other side of some challenges, you realize that, hey, man, like I can get through this. And that just builds your confidence for the next challenge and the next and the next. And you kind of, you approach it with a different mindset. You don't look at it like, oh, there's a challenge, let me run away. You look at it like, oh, there's a challenge, let me run through it. And I think that's something that we always connected on and kind of saw in each other. That's like, hey, man, like I'm not scared of a challenge. And, not everybody can say that.
Yeah, the challenges in life I think are real gifts.
Yeah.
Although I mean, I lived in a victim mindset for way too long,
Yeah.
blaming others, and until yeah, that things happened that maybe shouldn't have, but you know, overcame those and became strengths and real gifts. And when people don't have challenges in life, I mean, you see what happens
Yeah.
with, take the Vanderbilts, for example. They lost their money within 2 generations
Yeah.
because they, you know, hand fed their kids and didn't give them any challenges and didn't give them any structure. And that's just the way it seems to go
Yeah,
in
no,
life.
agreed. Agreed. I
So,
mean, I have a kind of a verse that has fueled me for, a long time. And it basically says, no discipline is pleasant at the time, but painful. But later on, it provides strength and righteousness for those who are trained by it. Right. So it's just like lifting weights, man. You get underneath that bench press the first time, it's gonna hurt. But you keep going and your chest gets stronger. You
yeah.
keep doing those biceps, then you're Ryan, you know what I mean? So, so it's just, that's to me is like, if you don't push through that pain, you'll
Yeah.
never get the gains. And that's life in general, man. If you just shy away from every challenge,
Yeah.
then you're going to crumble when it's time to really show some fortitude.
You need the stress
Yeah.
to become a better version of yourself. You're actually becoming a new person. And
Yeah.
you go through that and come out the other side. And like you said, not so bad most of the time. Way, way better than the imagination would let you think. So
1,000%, man. 1,000%. I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in our society right now. It's like, hey, man, it's okay to go through challenges. It's okay to bump your head because, on the long term view of life, it'll make you stronger, and those people that I know like that, you know, they're so resilient and they're so confident in themselves because they've actually challenged themselves. So,
and then when you go through that and get the experience, you naturally look for more challenges
yeah,
to
agreed.
become a better version of
Yeah,
yourself.
you understand that on the other side of that challenge, you
Yeah,
know,
it's like learning a new skill. It's
yeah,
like I know is people shy away, and I still do it. Like there's resistance there. Like I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but I got to put in the time
yeah,
to learn this skill because I'm eventually going to understand it. It's going to simplify it, and then I'm gonna have a new skill that
yeah,
makes me better.
yeah. It's just once again, I'm a guy, a man of many sayings, and something that I share with my team all the time is get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? If you get comfortable being uncomfortable, then you keep growing, right? And when you run into a challenge or you run into something you don't know, don't run away from it, lean into it, and that's kind of what we're talking about. It's like, hey, man, if you can't get comfortable being uncomfortable, you'll never grow. It's easy to stay in a rut, you know. Getting out of the rut is the difficult part, right? So, and the longer you lay there, the more difficult it gets. So, you know what I
The
mean?
harder it
Yeah,
gets
the
to
harder it
change.
gets. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And when you do that, it almost becomes, second nature to just keep growing.
yeah, once you're on that path, I mean, if you stop, you can regress.
Yeah.
I've regressed
Yeah.
at times. I'm sure you have.
Agreed.
Where I wasn't growing, I didn't feel good about myself, and I knew I had more potential in me, and I knew I wasn't living up to that.
Agreed.
I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, all the time. I mean,
It's not a straight path up.
yeah.
It's a windy and up and down and all over the place sometimes.
And it never stops, right? That's, there's all these catchphrases, continuous improvement, and all this stuff that's kind of flying around corporate America right now. Like, those are real things. Continuous improvement. You don't stop. You don't get to a plateau and just say, okay, I'm done learning. That's not a real thing, especially not in the modern, world, right? There's always something new to learn. The ever-changing industries and technologies, and it's like, if you stop, you can be obsolete really quickly.
Especially now. Like,
Yeah.
I think back about my grandparents were, they're dead now, but they'd be late 90s, right? And internet came along when they were around 70-ish. They didn't need to. They'd get by without learning that.
Yeah.
But from that time on,
Yeah.
if you aren't keeping up with technology in the changing world, you're irrelevant real quick, especially
Real quick.
and going forward, stay up on
Yeah.
current events and technology and the way things are changing so rapidly and exponentially more rapidly in the future.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. I mean, to me, I think even the pandemic accelerated that, right?
Oh, yeah.
The remote.
That's what
like,
really opened my eyes
Yeah.
to reality.
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of ways.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think once again, the challenge became a blessing. I think I came out of that situation, my relationships and personal and professional, came out stronger from that, because I realized how important having those relationships are, and adapting, and all those things that some people weren't able to perform under. I came out stronger because I was like, oh, I can do this. Oh, let me learn how to use Zoom a little bit better. Let me, like, put this tool in my tool belt. And now you see people struggling, can't even get their camera on, can't even, it's like, you look at them like, bro, you feel like you're 20 years behind, and it's really only 2, but it feels like, bro, you're so far behind everybody else. Like, it's going to be difficult to catch up if you don't pick up the pace. So I see it, man, all the time. And I think we're seeing a rapid shift just, in society in general.
I mean, I think people are starting to understand that. Like, well, how old are you?
37.
Yeah, so you're a few years younger than me. But, even me growing up, it was still like, go to high school, maybe go to college and get a job and work for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You don't learn the rest of your life. Then you maybe get a master's and you learn a little bit more, but then learning stops.
Yeah.
And you do your job and you're distracted by, whatever, football, porn, whatever,
Both.
whatever. There's a million distractions
Yeah.
out there
Yep.
that are seen as, they're accepted by culture and society. Like,
Yeah.
you think, but I mean, we're getting to a point now where you got to be a lifelong learner and continuously work on yourself if you're gonna make it and keep up with the world.
Yeah. And even just kind of back to some things about me that I think crafted that is, I was, primarily raised by my grandmother, and she was a school teacher. And I talk about it all the time because she taught me how to learn and teach myself, right? And when I was younger, it used to annoy me. Hey, go look it up, and I'd be like, I know you know the answer, but she didn't do that to me. And as I got older, do that for me. And as I got older, I realized what she was doing for me. And she continuously went to school. Like, she went back and, got a doctorate at like 70, you know what I mean? Like, so to me, it's like she continued to learn, and that was my example. So I think I was very fortunate to have that so close to me growing up, because it spurred that and continued to kind of push me to learn and teach myself and think critically, and, the things that they don't teach you in school.
And so many people don't have that, or they actually have the opposite of that, where like, like school's a waste of time, or learning or reading, or, is a waste of time. Why don't you watch the game, or, waste your time doing something else? It's like, nah, I'm good. I'm happy with what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. But yeah, it's definitely eye-opening. I think there's more of us having this conversation than even a year ago or 5 years ago. I've noticed it. And and I think that it's promising that hopefully for your daughter and my future children and, et cetera, we're instilling that and creating, a great generation of learners and adaptability and versatile humans. Don't put me in a box. I don't want to be in a box. Let me learn as much as I can. And, be as versatile as I can be.
So something you say whenever we talk is, and I've never asked you about this, but you say, I'm getting better in every way, or what do you say? I'm getting better every day in every way, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? Where'd that come from, and what does that mean to you?
Well, that comes from, once again, kind of my spiritual foundation. It's just, speaking affirmations over myself, right? I actually wrote a book about the power of words, 10 years ago, just kind of as my personal philosophy and, how words impact everything, and just we look at it like they're small things, but no, they're powerful and they're creative tools. So in doing that, I've found ways to kind of infuse affirmations into my day, right? Instead of just saying it in the morning or saying it at the end of the day or when you're meditating or whatever that quiet time is for you, it's just like, hey, what are some things I can say throughout the day that continue to reinforce that? So that's where that came from,
Yeah.
and just, and I just stuck with it because it's true, and that's my goal, and I just continue to, kind of like we talked about, push for continuous improvement. And one of the ways you do that is by training your brain, and, your words can almost trick your brain into thinking that, right? So that's kind of where that comes from. And,
Your thoughts definitely become your reality.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I believe. They become your actions. And so, yeah, you can control your thoughts, and, your body, it's weird. Like, your body doesn't actually know the difference between, even though you're thinking something, take the ice bath, for example. I get in every day at the gym, and the natural physical response, because you're in freezing water, is to, kind of panic and get out of the water, even though you know that you have control over being in that
Yeah.
you're doing it on purpose. You know it's going to be cold before you go in, and your body still has that reaction, or it wants to have that. I mean, I control that reaction. I try to respond instead of reacting to things. But that's just one example where it's interesting to me, where the mind knows something that the body doesn't. So if that's true, you can, like you said, trick your body into being what.
Yeah, and that's where kind of that power of words came from, is understanding the power of mind, of your mind and our minds, and, just, in general. And then the connectivity that words brings, right? Like, words put it into the universe and make it reality, right? So in your mind, you think it and you can manifest it and you can control your mind. But if you don't connect it to your actions, right, then it's just a dream, or it's just an imagining, right? So like you said, controlling your body, that's practice. That's, you train your mind, then you train your body, right? So what I like to practice is, training my mind and then using my words to help train my body, you know what I mean? And manifest that more quickly. Because now it's like 2 out of 3, like the body has to go along with that at a certain point, right? Like, you're getting overruled. I'm thinking it, I'm speaking it. Now I have to act on it in a lot of ways. So that's kind of one of my personal philosophies, and it's helped me a bunch, just kind of manifesting things, early on in life I probably didn't think were possible.
What's an example of that?
I mean, even just sitting here right now, man, like,
who would have thought we'd be sitting here together?
Exactly. Like, that's just crazy.
We made a few years ago.
Yeah. So sitting in the office and just having some real conversations and staying connected with genuine people, right? And just, we manifested that a long time ago, man, and said, even, the company that we're talking about, neither one of us work at anymore, right? But we knew pretty quickly that we were going to stay connected. We didn't know how, right? And I think there's still things on the horizon that we probably don't fully understand or see yet, but being able to kind of speak that and, train our minds to be like, hey man, this is a kindred spirit. This is a person who, I think has similar outlooks on life. That connectivity has manifested in a podcast. So that's just one of many, man,
And along the same lines, I'm no expert physicist or spiritual guru, but those two worlds, the spiritual world believes that the universe is made up of information, and quantum mechanics now is leaning towards that same idea, that the universe is made up of not matter, but information manifested in a physical form, which is exactly what we're talking about. So, I mean, it's crazy how those worlds are seemingly to come together, just what we're talking about just words and information.
Yeah, no,
It's so important.
yeah, it's way more important than we give ourselves credit for. And I think, that's just part of us relearning as humans, right? And kind of unlearning the things that we were taught for so long, which is that we don't have control over those things. And we are just these kind of like, whether, whatever your beliefs are in evolution, like if we're highly evolved apes, we've been given some very powerful tools at our disposal, right? So I think understanding that and now seeing science kind of start leaning that direction is empowering.
Yeah, exactly. So let's switch gears here for a minute to something I know you're passionate about. We talked a little bit about construction.
Yeah.
You're good at what you do. You lead, $100+ million construction jobs, I think,
Multiple.
at a time, right? But I know what you're really passionate about is leadership. So tell me a little bit about that passion, where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to have some great mentors that were, true servant leaders before servant leadership was a thing. So, Joe Garcia is one of them who, I don't give him enough credit, but he was fantastic and still is fantastic and, helps me even to this day. If I ask him a question, he'll help me, right? So, understanding that from a leadership perspective, what you do to help your team actually helps you is a big thing, and leading by example, and not the big I little you kind of mentality that I think is prevalent everywhere, especially in construction, but everywhere. And just understanding that, hey, if I help my team, it actually makes my job easier. If I take the time really early on to help them and strengthen them and actually find out what motivates them and tap into that, in the long run, not only are the projects going to be successful and that teammate going to be successful, but I'm going to be successful, and the team in general is going to be successful. And that mindset has helped me a bunch. And I think, fortunate for me, people gravitate to it, because they know it's genuine. It's not coming from a place of manipulation. It's really like, hey, I care about you and we're in this together. And, what can I do to make you better so you can make us better?
How do you provide constructive feedback to your team?
So I got a method. It's called sandwiching. Right. So, and I feel like we've talked about this in the past, but yeah, I mean, basically what I do is, I like to normalize direct conversations. Just because you're messing something up doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. It just means this specific task, you're not living up to what we agreed that we're living up to. So, how I like to provide that feedback is I always start off with something positive. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I know you're putting in effort. Then I provide some direction or some correction. And then after that, I like to end with something positive. So a lot of times, that first positive statement softens it and gets their guard down. And then it allows me to give some correction and then reinforce it with the positive. That way they know it's like, hey, I'm not picking on you. And the other thing is like allowing the team and the partners to, not always dictate timelines and tasks and etc., but have buy-in on it. I don't just tell you to do something tomorrow if it's not realistic. I'm going to say, hey, can you get this done by tomorrow? Right? Don't tell me you're going to get it done by tomorrow and it's next Wednesday. If it's next Wednesday, tell me it's next Wednesday. Right? So I think that allows the team to feel bought into the task and not just like they're getting dictated to, but they actually have some input on what they're doing. And then when it doesn't get achieved, then it's much simpler to have that conversation and say, hey, this is not what we agreed to. And, you fell short of what we agreed to.
Which leads into expectations. I know that's big for me. I've
Yeah.
seen you demonstrate that as well. Setting expectations up front
Yeah.
is extremely important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly. I mean, if there's a saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So, at a certain point, you have to start off with an expectation, and maybe it's far off and we talk about it and we trim it back, or maybe it's not enough and we accelerate it, right? But yeah, you have to set that expectation, especially as a leader, because if you're too vague, then it creates inefficiencies and rework. And we've experienced that, right? Where it's like, hey, get this done, and there's really no specifics on how it's supposed to get done, when it's supposed to get done. And then when it's not done, it's like, well, you did it wrong. Or when you do it the way you think you should do it, well, you did it wrong. And it's like, well, you never gave me any real expectation on what this is supposed to look like. So to me, that's vital for strong management and strong team building, is being able to clearly communicate what the goal is so we can achieve it in, as effective as possible.
Say someone on your team is underperforming, right? What do you find a common theme? Because I mean, most people are capable of a lot more than they actually do. It usually doesn't come down to being capable of doing the job when you're underperforming. What do you find? Is there a common thing that you find when that's happening with someone?
Lack of motivation, right? So it's, being able to once again connect with your team and connect with your, colleagues and partners. And you're not always going to know everybody, right? But understanding generally what motivates them, right? And tapping into that, whether that's spending time with your kids or learning something new. Like some guys on my team, they just want to learn something new. So I expose them to way more than probably more than other supervisors would, because I understand that's what motivates them. Just seeing the process encourages them, right? So, and then there's some guys that want to go home, and go spend time with their kids, and I get that too. So being able to say, hey, like, let's get this done so you can go home, right? Being able to tap in that and really just cater into each person's motivation is the key. And that doesn't always solve everything. There's some people who, it's very difficult to find that or tap into it consistently. But in general, if you can find what motivates somebody, you can encourage them to, you know, perform adequately.
And like you said, you're not going to know everyone intimately, but you're definitely not going to know their motivations if you don't get to know them at all.
You got to have some real conversations and let them see you as a person first, because then once again, when you are providing that correction or that redirect, it doesn't feel as harsh, because I'm not just some guy stepping out of the office and yelling at you. Like, we've had conversations. I know you got kids. I know you got this. I know you're going to the basketball game on Saturday, right? Like little things like that, and being able to kind of take the time to have that conversation is important. Even with trade partners, I tell people that I train all the time, like, hey man, when you're in these conversations and you're negotiating with subcontractors or clients or whatever, like, it might take you 2 minutes longer, but have a real conversation. Don't just jump right in, right? Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm asking about this, like, because then nobody wants to answer your call. But I guarantee, there's so many times when somebody can't get a hold of somebody, and then I call and they answer on the first ring. And it's because they know that, first of all, I'm going to be, I'm cognizant of their time, so I'm going to be aware of that. And then secondly, I'm not just going to just be so cut and dry that the conversation isn't pleasant. Because when you look at that call and it's an unpleasant conversation, you're like, I can wait. It can wait. But when you're like, hey, I'm going to laugh with this guy. Yeah, it's going to be some business, but I'm going to laugh. And, I know he's really going to listen to me. You're going to get much more responsiveness from whoever's on the other end of that call. So I tell people that all the time. It's like, you have to take the time to know people. You don't have to be best friends, but at least, detach yourself from just the robotic business conversation. And maybe they like sports, or maybe they like, whatever. Somebody you can often find a common ground if you're looking for it.
Definitely.
So
And relationships are key, especially in such a labor intensive industry. I mean, it's crazy. Every nail and screw is done by not a robot, but
yeah,
a person that, within another team that, I mean, it's just tons of people involved in these projects. So I saw you with the trade partners building relationships, and that obviously went a long way in the success and the projects you were working on.
yeah. And it's still, I mean, I tell people all the time, I built a whole career off relationships. I see myself as an intelligent man. I'm not always the most intelligent person in the room. I get that. But for the most part, I think the people I work with can trust me, and they know that I'm going to come into a situation with genuine intent, and not looking to trick them, or, I want to do good business, and they know that, right?
Mhm.
So being able to establish that allows people to, kind of let their guard down in a lot of ways. I had a trade the other day who was talking to me. We were going over some contract language, and he said, hey man, we were going to go through the boilerplate, but the owner said, it's all good. It's Stephen Byrd's job. We trust him. And I was like, wow, like, first of all, you probably should look at it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I get it, right? Like, there's a certain amount of comfort when you know the person is not out to trick you, and it's like, hey man, like, I appreciate that, and it's something that it takes a while to establish, but once you get it, you shouldn't let it go.
Absolutely. So motivation. I know you like motivation, you like quotes. Where do you get your motivation from?
I mean, my motivation, is, it comes from a lot of things. And first of all, I love to learn. I love accomplishments. I love challenges. I love helping other people grow, which seems cliche, but I really do. Like, I was asked what's one of my best professional accomplishments. And to me, it's the people that I've worked with and helped train and help grow and then watching them thrive. Right. It's like, oh man, I remember when that person didn't even know how to read plans and now she's over here doing XYZ. Right. So that's part of the motivation. And then also, I think just, you know, kind of being able to encourage people to be their best self. I believe that, and I thrive, I kind of seek that myself, but seeing other people kind of flip that switch and change their mindset is empowering for me. And hopefully in a small way, I'm making an impact on them and their families and, society in the long run.
Yeah, I see that as, abundance versus scarcity mindset,
Oh,
right?
1,000%.
There's enough for everyone to learn, where the opposite is like, you got to hold your knowledge and skills close because you don't want someone taking your job, or there's not enough jobs out there for you to make a living. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in the same boat, the abundance mindset of, there's plenty out there for everyone.
Hold on too tight.
Help each other, motivate each other to grow and learn.
And I think that's just, like we talk about the shift in society, I think that's just how we've been taught for so long, right? Where it's like, well, if you're the CEO, your value isn't that you motivate people, your value isn't that you're charismatic and, you help people grow. Your value is that you know something that somebody else doesn't, right? And in the modern world, that's just not real anymore, right? And I think when you hold on to that, it shows an insecurity. And I don't need to know everything. I freely share information because I know my value is not based on the information I'm withholding. It's actually the sharing of the information that brings my value, right? So, and people look to that and they know that if they come to me, they're gonna get the information and they're gonna, and there's so many times when I sit with the team and I'm like, hey, let's figure it out together. I don't know either. You know what? That's a fucking great question.
You don't have to know.
Yeah, let's sit down and figure it out together. And I think the teams that I've worked with that see that, they're like, oh, it's crazy because I had a new teammate on board today and I met him and I could tell he was nervous and he was like, hey man, just so you know, I don't know everything. And I was like, me neither. And I could just see him relaxing like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, I don't gotta know. I'm like, hey man, I'm not expecting you to know everything, right? And I could just see him just like visibly relax because a lot of times people feel pressure like they gotta know something that they don't. And to me, it's like, hey, we'll learn together if we have to. So that's just a different mindset. And back to the abundance mindset rather than, the scarcity mindset.
Yeah, and that comes from being in environments where you had to know everything,
Yeah.
or you couldn't be in an environment where you couldn't be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't say I don't know. You had to. You couldn't show any vulnerabilities in environments like that.
Yeah, and that's just not real. It's just not real, And if that's what you think you need to do, like you're being disingenuous to yourself. And it's very obvious. Another thing, like I've talked to people all the time, is like, hey man, the only time bullshitting works is if you're the smartest person in the room. You should never assume you're the smartest person in the room. Because yeah, it works when nobody else knows. But as soon as that one person in the room knows you're bullshitting, you've lost all credibility, right? So I, all the time, hey, I'm not sure. Let me figure it out. And then when I come back the next day with an answer, guess what? The person I'm talking to is now confident in my answer because I actually went and vetted it and made sure that the information was accurate rather than just telling them something to tell them something. And then a week later, they're like, hey man, last week you said it was 100,000. Now it's 200,000. Like, I don't believe anything you say now. Right. So I think, like you said, showing that vulnerability and being like, hey, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you. I think we have to, unlearn that kind of, I don't know what it is, machismo or whatever it is. It's ego. We got to let it go.
Yeah, it's a survival tactic.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was in environments before.
Yeah.
He had to. That's what he learned as a survival tactic, or that's the way he got by. So.
Yeah. And I get it. And it's way more common than we give ourselves credit for. I mean, for us, what we kind of, how we live and, that vulnerability and that abundance mindset, not as many people think that way, right? So I think for us, it's like commonplace, but that's not how most people think. Most people are in a scarcity mindset, unfortunately, and it shows.
And you shouldn't be the smartest guy in the room. You should be working towards other rooms
Yeah.
where you're definitely not the smartest guy in the
Oh,
room, because
1000%.
there's levels to it. Of course, you're the average of, you know, the 5 people that you surround yourself with, whether it's at work, in person, or on podcasts or books, authors, whatever you're surrounding yourself with. And the beauty now is you can choose that. We didn't have that ability before the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to go to the library to
Yeah.
surround yourself by people with bigger ideas and, you know, better insights and life experience. But now it's available at your fingertips. It doesn't have to be the 5 people that you physically see every day.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I mean, it really is. You know, in the age of information, which is what we're living in right now, ignorance is a choice. You know, you can find out whatever you really desire to find out. You might have to check your sources, right? But that's,
Sure.
you know, that's, you know, that's just, you know, that's another lesson I have all the time. Like, hey, man, look at the source that you're getting that information from. But in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. You know, who you surround yourself with is important, and you gotta, you know,
Because you can definitely find a source that supports
Oh,
what
of
you
course.
want it to say.
Yeah, of course.
And I think people use that too much.
Yeah.
But I forget who said this, but said the truth is the sum of all possible perspectives. So
Yeah.
imagine 8 billion people on Earth, 8 billion different perspectives. That's the truth.
Yeah. No, it's huge. And that it reminds me of some books that I read, you know, by an author called Neil Donald Walsh. And he always talks about there is not, very seldom is there one way, right? There's a way, but, you know, I think for a long time we've been taught that our way is the right way. Our God is the only God. There's 3,000 gods or whatever that people worship. Like, what's the odds that it's just one, right? So I think understanding that there are different perspectives, and a lot of times our perspective is clouded by our experiences, right? If you don't ever interact, if we never interact, and I've never interacted with somebody like you never interacted with somebody like me, it's easy to get propaganda shoved down our throat. And I think, you know, understanding that everybody has their own perspective, and, you know, I know this is, you know, kind of a taboo topic, but, you know, there really is no right and wrong, absolute, right? There's your perspective. Most people are doing what they think is the right thing.
There's polarities and there's degrees.
Yeah.
No, the same right and wrong
Yeah.
doesn't exist. It's a degree on a scale of polarity.
Yeah, agreed. There has to be up to be a down.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean
Has
up's
to be-
bad or down's bad.
Has to be light to be dark.
Yeah.
Have to have bad for good.
Yeah, agreed. So to me, it's just, you know, that's part of, you know, just continuing to grow just consciously and understand that, you know, a lot of times when I have conversations with people, whether it's professionally or personally, and I don't really agree, sometimes I got to step back and be like, well, why would you think that way? Right. And oftentimes that gives me a different perspective and allows me to attempt to see through their lens and be like, hey, man, maybe if I had grown up in that same environment or seen the things they've seen or done the things they've done, I might think the same way, you know?
Yeah, and you most likely would.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it usually comes down to.
Yeah.
But it's funny, it comes back to information. It's like, if you're just parroting everything that you hear on Fox News or CNN or whatever your environment you grew up in, the culture you grew up in, if you believe all the same things as those people, you're not thinking for yourself at all.
Yeah,
There's no possible way that you're just parroting information that you heard.
Yeah, and you're being conditioned, right? Whether you know it or not. And I get it. Ignorance is bliss. It's much simpler to just believe your perspective is the only way and just go through life that way, you know, with a couple speed bumps where you run into somebody that doesn't think the same way, rather than really challenge yourself. And I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in the world where people, anything that doesn't fit within their, you know, kind of realm of reality is just disregarded. Oh, that's just not real. And it's like, yeah, but to that person, it's real, right? And why is it real like that? So I think we've seen a lot of that over the last 5 years, just with, you know, kind of some of these more hot topics politically and, you know, geopolitically, right? Where it's like everybody has their own viewpoint and respecting that is important.
Yeah, I heard a statistic today on a podcast I was listening to. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something around, you know, was it 64 when Kennedy was assassinated?
Something like that, maybe
I'm
63,
probably
something like
getting
that.
that wrong, but
Yeah, don't quote
pre that time, the level of, you know, people that trusted the media was like 70 some percent. It's down to like 29%, and for good reason. I mean, they've just shown, government's shown over and over that they are not to be trusted.
Yeah.
But they're like, watch this, we're gonna tell them this and they're gonna believe us. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy, but it comes back to information and the availability of it, which started with the internet and connected us worldwide. So now we have different values and customs and ethics. And then now we're connected to people halfway across the world who have different views and ethics and culture. And that's where I think a lot of the divisiveness comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think we focus way too much on our differences rather than what we have in common. Because ultimately, we all want the basic same things, man. We want to be happy. We want to be peaceful. We want to take care of our family. You know what I mean? Like at our root, we're very similar. Even, and I know you've traveled and I like to travel abroad whenever I get a chance. And, the more I interact with people from those different cultures and different areas, I realize we all have those things in common. Nobody wants to not be able to provide for their family. Nobody wants to feel threatened and in a state of, kind of disarray. And when you just break it down to the, smallest common denominator, it's usually it. And we have way more in common now. Maybe, eat a different food, or you call your God a different name, or, you're a Republican or Democrat. But that to me is just semantics at a certain point, and it's not really the substance of what you're really seeking in life, which are the more basic things.
Yeah, we're all the same at the core.
Yeah.
Same as spirituality
Yeah.
and religions. All religions have the same core
Yeah.
values. When you boil it down to its core, it's all the same.
Yeah.
And then it gets manipulated and commercialized, and the message changes, and then they instill fear and controlling measures and manipulation, and it becomes something that is completely different than the original intent or the original message.
Oh, 1,000%. And it's crazy just because you see it so vividly, especially like you said, in the age of information. And, we're all born with spirits and we're taught religion, right? So to me, it's like that spirituality is the core. That's who we are. And then we're taught, and I think religion in general was, I like to think that it started off with good intents, right? A way to kind of, capture our spirituality to where we can understand it in certain cultures. And like you said, it's just been manipulated to be control mechanisms. And it's, to me, it's super obvious that's what it's for, right? When you start pitting people against each other, but the book you're reading says the opposite, it's like, we're walking contradictions at this
And
point.
then you can't ask the hard questions. You're like, no, don't ask that.
Don't ask that. Yeah.
Just believe.
Just trust.
Yeah, just
believe. And
trust
it's like,
that.
yeah, but that's not logical. And
that comes back to the gatekeepers of information that we're talking about. We've been talking about information so much. It's like, the information's out there. I don't need to believe what the doctor is telling me because he probably doesn't know what the hell he's talking about anyway. I need to go research it and figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Same thing with, teachers or law or all that stuff is credentials are not a proxy for good decision making or knowledge or wisdom.
1,000%. And it's just, to me, I think it's encouraging to run into people like you because for so long I've been kind of that, that isolated voice. I mean, I've thought about so many times just even as a child, right? Like, I remember being in school and they're talking about Columbus discovering America. And I was like, how do you discover something if somebody was already there? And the teacher was like, if she could have ushered me out of the room at that point, she would have. But I was just curious. And like I said, my grandmother taught me to think for myself and it just didn't make sense. How do you show up to a shore and there's already societies and cities there and you discovered it? That's not accurate, right? Like, and I think now we all know that more, but there was a long time when we were in school where that was the gospel, and we were taught that, right? And it's just like, there's so many examples of that where, just.
Well, winners have always written the history.
Yeah. That's why it's his story, right? And I get that. And it's just, at this point, you can't conceal that as well as you could 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, right? Like that information is out there if you're looking for it. And a lot of those kind of, those gatekeepers of knowledge are being exposed, and I mean, even religious people, like there's so many people who have blindly followed and now they're seeing the cracks in the logic or the lack of logic in a lot of ways. I think it's going to eventually make us better as a society. Just, you got to go through the growth once again. It's a little painful, but you got to go through it to get there.
It's definitely going to be painful.
Yeah.
And it's going to get more painful. Do you follow, you know who Graham Hancock is?
I've heard the name, not actively though.
It just reminds me of his work and how he's exposing, archaeology. Basically, we don't know anything.
Yeah, at all.
We have zero idea where it's been presented so long as, yeah, this is the way things happen, and we know pretty much most things, but no, I mean, and then personally, when you start learning more and digging into things more, it's like the Hall of Mirrors. You're like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I know absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm so far behind. I got so much to learn. And that's like in mainstream archaeology, refuses to accept the discoveries that he's making, that these structures they don't know how they were built with these megalithic stones and these stones that are so heavy that we don't even have machinery today that could move them, and that they were built far before mainstream archaeology will say, and then they're still teaching that in schools today. They're still teaching stuff that's being debunked, that it's going to take a while for mainstream anything to catch up with what's actually going on in the world, what we're discovering.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's a shock to your system, right? And not many people are, blessed to have the, self-awareness to discard something that they've been taught so easily, right? Like for you and for me, I think we can see it and say, oh man, I was misled, and move on. Whereas some people, it's just such a shock to their system that I get it. I get why they spoon feed that type of information, because if you just expose everybody to it, I mean, there's people that wouldn't know how to deal with it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that, man. I mean, just seeing the pyramids and the 4 different.
Yeah, you've been there. I've actually been there.
Yeah, I mean, you go there and you see it, and you're like, what you're saying doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
At all, right? And they know it. And even, if you get a real historian or a real, Egyptologist, I think they're called, they'll tell you, hey, we're not sure. And we discover new shit every single day. And it's like, to just make it seem as if is once again like you're bullshitting, and nobody knew you were bullshitting, but now we can see you're bullshitting, and it's like, yeah, that's not right, man. And there's a lot of that, man. And I've been fortunate to interact with some of those people that, similar to the man Graham Hancock that you just kind of mentioned, that are challenging those and saying, hey, like what we're teaching in these books isn't right. And it's, it's very obvious to anybody that's actually in those rooms that what's being taught to society is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Like, you're a mainstream scientist and that's your living. Like, yeah, you go against the system. Yeah. So, I mean, that, and, I've come to realize that, institutions, they protect the institution, not the individual.
Oh,
and
100%.
We've seen that over and over in history, from the Catholic Church protecting priests to, there's huge scandal in the Boy Scouts where they were protecting a lot of predators that came in, and, they had to protect that image of the institution. Over and over, it's been proven that, people at the top of those institutions are gonna protect the institution over the individual.
Yeah, and it's it's disappointing, but I mean, once again, it's great to see those things exposed in the long run, and I think it's a reckoning in a lot of ways, right? I mean, even how do you feel
these
about
conversations weren't even happening 10 years ago.
So. Oh, not at all. I mean, not at all. And if they did, they were hush. I mean, it reminds me of kind of one of those things. Hey, when you're at the dinner table, you don't talk about politics and religion, and it's like, those are literally probably the 2 most important topics, but what we should have been taught is how to have those conversations civilly, right? You can be civil and disagree, and I think for so long we were just told, just don't talk about it, and it created this vacuum where you didn't get those interactions and be able to see other people's perspective, which in turn changes your perspective and makes us more homogenous in our kind of interactions. So yeah, 1,000%, man. Nobody was having that conversation, when we were younger.
Well, it wasn't even very long ago in history when you were burning people or killing people, torturing people for not, just for disagreeing with different views. I mean, what Salem witch trials was either in the 14 or 1500s. That's not.
I don't even think it was that long ago.
That's not very long ago. The Inquisition was, several 500-600 years ago. It's not.
I mean, Galileo. I think Galileo got killed for saying that the Earth rotated the sun.
Even things, it's not long ago at all.
No.
I mean, but at least now we can. All you have to worry about is being canceled you got a big enough audience, which they are still trying to do to this day. I
Yeah.
mean, so, but that's not as scary as being burned alive.
Agreed. Yeah, no, it's definitely a different game. And like I said, and I think that's once again a control mechanism as, those gatekeepers understand that their hold on this world, frankly, is loosening. So this
And
is,
that's scary.
yeah, it's scary to them, right? They want to hold on and they don't got long to hold on because at a certain point, it's just the tide is just too much to hold back.
Yeah, and it's generational too. I think the younger generation is much more aware and skeptical and not trusting
Yeah.
mainstream anything, whether it's school, government, religion, science.
Attacking the institutions that have been, protecting themselves for so long. So, at a certain point, we got to realize that the institutions need us more than we need the institutions. That's the reality. So as soon as we stand up as a society, the game's over. Can't do anything about that. Especially if we're united in any sense, right? That's why they work so hard, mainstream media specifically works so hard to keep us separated. Because if we're not separated and we're not pitted against each other, then we're gonna look at them, and they work to keep it that way.
Yeah, I mean, World War II era, like those people, they couldn't stand it. There was nothing they could do
Yeah.
to go against the empire at that time. So it's just crazy to think how recent that was in history.
Yeah, it's a blink, man. It's a lifespan right now.
Mhm.
Which is crazy to think about. And that's why it's important to keep having the conversations because, we're not working towards progress and, getting ourselves better individually and collectively. We're doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Acknowledging our mistakes and moving on is important and not brushing it under the rug and pretending like it never happened, which I think we're getting better at, but there's a segment of society that wants to just not talk about it and hope it goes away. And it's the same people in business that don't want to have the tough conversations. It's the same, it's just that conflict avoidance, which is literally the worst way to, kind of manage conflict.
So motivation, is there anyone you look to for motivation in your life? Books, podcasts, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few people. I mean, I listen to, some different podcasts, just some financial guys, some Dr. Boyce, and some, I like to take from all different places. I listen to Joel Osteen sometimes. People don't like Joel Osteen, but I like Joel Osteen sometimes. And just reading books. Like I talked about Neil Donald Walsh. I like Neil Donald Walsh books and just,
What's he written? I don't.
he writes a lot of like more like spiritual books, like Conversation with God series. I don't know if you ever heard the Conversation with God series. So he has a lot of those. But yeah, I mean, just it's really eclectic, man. It's crazy because I really take information from so many different places just because there's a thirst for knowledge. And, I rabbit hole a lot and read news and then read another account of news and kind of attempt to get a more 360 view of the situation before kind of making an observation. So, and then just in general, just, the people around me, family, and just people that have encouraged me, they motivate me. But yeah, I mean, it's so eclectic, man. I can't even really put my finger on like who and where just because it changes from week to week, man. I'll listen to some podcasts and then, 2 weeks later, I'm listening to a different one. And that's just kind of sporadic.
That's the thing for me, like trying to figure out world news, like what is actually going on.
Yeah.
Because you got to look at so many sources just to kind of synthesize together a picture of what's actually going on. Like, there's not one source I've found that is, all encompassing. So that's frustrating, but, the good thing is it makes me read more information and look at different perspectives. So hey, that's a good thing in the long run.
Same thing, man. I'll look at, Al Jazeera, I'll look at BBC News, I'll watch some Fox News, I'll watch some CNN, and then kind of just like mush it together and like, yeah, exactly. So
try to figure it out.
Yeah, just absorbing as much as I can and, and then just kind of following, some logic, right? Like if something doesn't make sense and it doesn't feel right, oftentimes it's probably not, and I think that we've been taught to not trust our intuition, which I think is, a detriment to us, right? Like, those gut instincts, right, have been discouraged for so long that we've almost looked at them as, like
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, no, man, like a lot of times we know before we know. And there's so many examples. And, I mean, to me, COVID was one, right? Where no matter what side of the fence you're on with just the process, I think we all understood that something was going on,
Mm,
right? And it didn't feel right.
mm.
And no matter what you think that is, I think at the core, we understood that there was something going on, right? And now it's being exposed, right? In a lot of ways. And people are like, oh, well, that wasn't right. And oh, well, yeah, we did rush these things. And oh, yeah, we did manipulate the data. And it's like,
We did lie to you to your
yeah,
face.
yeah, agreed. So
Yeah.
once again, control mechanisms and trusting that. And I think our first instinct for a lot of people that I talked to personally was like, this doesn't feel right, And some people were almost forced into submission, and others were more vocal, and some people kind of stayed central. But I think at our core, we all understood that there was something going on that was beyond what they were telling us.
Yeah. And who knows what's next, but there's definitely a next.
Oh yeah, I mean, it went way too well for them not to make another attempt. That's just the reality, and it worked. And I don't think it worked as well as they probably wanted it to, but I also don't think it discouraged them from doing it again, right? Like, being able to kind of implement something that was so controlling. And one thing is like they always say, hey, when you see an issue, don't look at who it impacts, look at who benefits from it, right?
Exactly. Follow the money, see who's actually benefiting from it, and you usually find your answer somewhere
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. So to me, that's once again one of the methodologies is to kind of focus on the victims rather than the beneficiaries of some of those, issues. And if you kind of flip that around, then it gives you a different perspective. And like you said, allows you to kind of find the motivation for some of these actions. I think just bringing it back to kind of professional, I think there's some really interesting things going on in construction and development. And, I mean, I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
I'm sure you did, where like now you can't charge 6% to sell a house anymore. And just, I think some of that is kind of correcting itself. Interest rates and work and lack of work and, just everything, man. It's crazy right now. It's a crazy time. And, the people that are doing what we're doing and learning and, kind of pursuing, the growth are going to thrive here as things shake out, in my opinion.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about construction being so labor intensive. Have you seen any innovations in
Um,
construction, or what are you seeing?
I mean, there's a bunch of innovations. I mean, it's just, to me, it's so slow moving for a good reason in a lot of ways, right? Like these buildings got to last hundreds of years, in theory, at least 50, so it's so slow moving. But there's some innovations that I like. I mean, I really like automating systems. I don't think you get rid of the human element anytime soon, but I think you can assist the human element, right? So they have like some robotics that, for example, go on somebody's back and assist them with laying brick or working above their head or to where they don't get tired as much. So I think that is probably the first wave of it. I don't think we get to the point where robots are building our buildings because it's just we're just not there. But I do think that there's opportunities to use the tech in a way that assists, right? And I do that even on the management side by, creating automated systems. And hey, man, if I got this same information in 5 places, why don't I just make these documents talk to each other? And then I just input it in one and it populates in 5, right? So I think those type of efficiencies are gaining traction, and the people that see that are going to thrive. And then the next part is like, as we get into using the tech more often, it'll speed us up. A concrete company recently that I'm working with sent me, basically some product that they want to use where it can test the PSI of the concrete like immediately. Right. And it doesn't really mean much to people who are in the industry, but rather than waiting 3 or 7 days for brake testing, now I can see that live. So to me, those are the type of things that it's not gonna, you know, eliminate the human element, but it will aid the human element and make us more efficient and work smarter, not harder.
You using any AI tools in your job?
No, not yet. But I mean, I see it, right? I mean, it's just there's opportunities there to create, documents and create, efficiencies. I haven't used it as actively as I probably should, but it's just the resistance to the change I think that construction's struggling with. And then you have the, other side of the coin, which is, I read a stat that said in 2030 there'll be a deficit of 900,000 jobs in construction. It's crazy.
In 2030?
2030, right?
Because of AI?
It's because of the fact that we're not
Oh,
getting enough people into
oh,
the industry.
gotcha.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, because it's so
'Cause, yeah, I
rigid,
mean,
because it's
yeah.
so, you know what I mean? It's like, it's been discouraged for so long. Like you said, people are encouraged to go to school. Not everybody's made for college. Some people are good at being electricians, and, and I think just the rigidity of the industry is discouraging a lot of people that are coming out of school and potentially could be beneficial to the industry. They're like, yeah, man, but I don't want some old guy just yelling at me all day. I get it, right? Like, why would I do that when I could do YouTube videos and make the same money? So it's just, we're not marketing ourselves as well as I think we can, and it's going to show. And then, because this has been something that's been happening for a decade, now we have the older generation that's moving towards retirement, and in a lot of ways, they're providing resistance to that next wave rather than encouraging and grooming that next wave. The scarcity mindset is going to bite us, right? Let me hold on to all this information so I can elongate this last portion of my career, rather than taking these younger people and encouraging them so we can kind of maintain, the industry as a whole. So it can be frightening, man. I mean, it's a benefit for me because I'm going to thrive, right? And I see that, and but collectively, I think we're gonna continue to struggle if we don't, flip the switch and recognize that, there's not only one way to do things, and there's not only one type of person or one type of mind that can get these things done. So
I feel like I don't really have anything to back it up, but I just feel like in this cycle of technology and innovation and information that trades are going to become more valuable and highly sought after at
yeah,
some point in the future.
I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening. I mean, I had a meeting today, and one of the executives that I work with was like, man, it's just difficult to find strong, skilled labor, right? So if you have those relationships, first of all, you're valuable. And then if you can tap into the market, then you're valuable. It's something that I'm working on with some trade partners, is kind of developing some more active training programs. I think there's a lot of underserved communities that, marginalized communities that are primed to be involved with construction and learn trades, and in the next 5 years can provide a great boost, whereas normally we haven't been encouraging their involvement, and reaching out to them and encouraging it and showing how it can change your life will probably hopefully turn that tide, and get people who normally wouldn't consider construction to be in construction, whether that's women or young people or people of color, whatever it is, right? I mean, even young white guys, like, they're not going into construction, whereas 50 years ago, it was an honorable thing to be a tradesman, right? And it's just been so discouraged, where it's like the next generation looks at it like it's not, there's no future in it. And the reality is it's the opposite.
And in Phoenix, where we are, I mean, the trades are dominated by Hispanics,
Yeah.
and those guys are impressive.
Yeah.
Are hard workers. They don't complain. They seem to have a good time working.
Yeah.
Like, I just had my front yard done. Great crew. I mean, awesome. They were out there listening to music, having a great time, redoing my yard.
Yeah.
And I just have a lot of respect for those guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely
Working in the heat.
Yeah. I mean, it can definitely feel like an accomplishment, man. And there's something to be said about, old fashioned hard work. And, I think we understand that, and hopefully we can convey that going forward. And yeah, I mean, there's no shame in working with your hands. And I think that for a long time, we made it seem like only dummies did that. And we're paying the price now for discouraging so many smart people from getting involved. And what's honestly one of the more critical industries for society. Like, if you're in a city and you're not building, your city is dying. That's the reality. So, like, I don't know where we went astray. I think it was just the tech booms and some other things that, people saw as more opportunistic. But yeah, I mean, construction makes the world go round. If you go to a city and you're not seeing construction, then you're probably seeing a city dying.
You'll see a bunch of cranes.
Something's going wrong.
You have hashtag future of construction on your LinkedIn. What does that mean?
I mean, it's just all the things we're talking about, right? Understanding how to incorporate tech, understanding how to encourage the next generation to get involved, providing paths for real career growth and showing what that looks like, and embracing that is part of it, right? And then the other thing is just all the leadership aspects, right? Like, I don't need to know everything. I don't need to pretend I know everything. And I run into that all the time where, people, I've been doing this for whatever years, and it's like, okay, like that doesn't discredit that what I'm bringing to the table is real.
Mhm.
And I think for so long, that mindset has been prevalent that we got to shift it and say, hey, man, everybody brings value to the table. It takes real teams to make these jobs work. And that's the future of construction. It's not remaining the same, it's embracing the change.
And yeah, bringing out potential and people realizing that potential. And I know that's something you focus on in practice, but I think paradigm shift towards that is pretty imperative.
Yeah, agreed. And it's not just construction, but obviously being in the industry, it's something that I'm close to. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, worldwide, I mean, we make everyone better. The world's a better place.
yeah,
Like, the
100%.
more conscious we become, the more free we become. And I don't know about you, but sovereignty is real important to me.
Oh, 1,000%.
So
Yeah.
I want to, have freedom of thought and speech and all that. So
Yeah, agreed. And that only happens when we encourage each other to speak up. When we encourage each other to think freely and don't, diminish anybody else's thought process, right? There's no such thing as just, in my mind, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Except the one that doesn't get asked. So if you don't know, you should ask, and encouraging that. And that's all back to kind of, that future construction hashtag I use from time to time, which is, hey man, like, if we're not encouraging that next generation to ask questions and be inquisitive and find a better way, then we're dooming ourselves to kind of, stagnate, which is scary to think about. What's something, like I said, that's so important as literally our infrastructure and literally our homes and, kind of the fabric of society in a lot of ways, and how we, kind of establish ourselves as cities and states. And, like, what do you do if you can't build freeways? What do you do if you can't build houses? What do you do if you can't build places for people to live and work? And you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
at a certain point, your society is going to start decaying, so
Mhm.
scary to think that we've discouraged that for so long.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, you're already seeing it, but I think that goes in cycles too.
Yeah, agreed. Eventually, it's going to come full circle. I think it's just, going through this portion of the cycle that we're seeing, right? Like, it's a little crazy to see, but
Costs have skyrocketed
Yeah.
in the last few years. It's crazy to see.
there's a lot of gouging, man. I feel like there's a lot of price gouging, but that's going to come back down to earth too, because right now jobs are dying, man.
So what are you seeing in the trades? Because when it was booming, all these developers are building as many projects as they can get funded,
Yeah.
right? And all the trades are backed up, and they're just throwing out FU prices to everyone.
Yeah.
And now I'm guessing that they're at a point where they need the work again, and they're having to price out jobs accordingly. Or
Oh yeah, they're definitely way more aggressive, understanding, especially the more savvier trades. They see the writing on the wall, and they understand that, yeah, while you're busy right now, if you don't pick up a couple jobs here soon, you're not going to be busy next year, right? So I think a lot of them are seeing that, and they're getting way more aggressive. And, frankly, it's everywhere. Like, people are cutting margins, I think we're really bloated just in general. And I think everybody's recognizing that in order to survive or, make it through this next cycle, we have to adapt.
And you see that in the front end trades, right? I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about, like I said, $100 million construction projects that go on for 2 years.
Yeah.
So you're seeing in the front end trades, where the back end trades are still kind of living fat and happy for
Yeah.
a little while because
Yeah.
they got that work lined up. But when the jobs aren't coming in, then it trickles down to
Oh,
them
yeah.
eventually. It takes a little while.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work over the past year that has gone away.
Yeah.
I want to say it's a staggering number. It's like, 50+% of jobs that were slated to start this year never started. And there's a lot of developers and general contractors that are struggling because of it, man. That means there's, layoffs happening, and, people can't get jobs started. And at a certain point, it's just not sustainable. So the companies that adapt, and I'm fortunate to contract with a company that does that, that adapts and understands that, will thrive, and those that think they could just remain kind of status quo, they're gonna struggle, man. They're gonna struggle, and you're already seeing it right now, right? It's gonna be that significant where, there's a lot of companies that didn't start a job this year and they won't start a job next year. And at a certain point, like you said, that 2-year cycle, now it's you don't have any more work.
Yeah, and it's another 2 years before you get that project built
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
and start making some revenue on it.
Exactly.
It was so interesting to see. I mean, you study economics, you understand cycles and different things, but just to see it happen in real time where debt turned off, like they're not funding any
Oh, yeah.
projects, and you're like, wow, they actually control this whole entire industry. Like
Yeah.
if they're not lending money, then equity, even if it's available, isn't entering the market.
Yeah.
And so it was just so interesting to see how quickly that turned off and how quickly projects stopped getting funded.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've seen, and I was fortunate to start some of my management as we were kind of coming out of the Great Recession and seeing some of that and understanding that market shifts is important, right? So, for example, like while there's not a lot of Class A properties getting built, my colleagues that do like affordable housing and government housing, their work's picking up because that equity is shifting to safe havens, right? So if you got $40 million, you don't want it sitting in the bank. You want to put it somewhere where it's going to make you some more money. And right now, those Class A properties just aren't as appealing because of the interest rates. But when you can get government loans at low interest rates and, tax credits and those type of things, like
Which
that's
you
where
have
they're
to,
putting their money.
by the way, to fund those projects. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's where I'm seeing a lot of the shift. And, I got quite a few colleagues that do that type of work. And whereas, 3-4 years ago, they were slowing down, now they got more work than they know what to do with, starting to line up because a lot of those equity funds and lenders are shifting to, what they consider safe havens, which are government backed jobs and government guaranteed, projects.
Yeah, I visited Washington, D.C. when I was in my master's program, real estate development, and talking, visited a bunch of sites, different bunch of people and talked to them. And 07, 08, they barely felt it
Yeah.
because so much, the economy there is backed by government. It's all government employees and government industry, and they barely felt the recession at all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So interesting to,
Yeah.
and we're in somewhere like Phoenix where we were hit, some of the hardest in the country.
Yeah.
So it's just so interesting to learn stuff like that and
Yeah.
see how things actually work.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's what I think for those that, aren't familiar, that's what I think. And that's what I'm kind of focusing on is pivoting towards some of those projects. I think there's going to be a lot more, adaptive reuse projects where, you have office buildings sitting and it makes sense to turn it into apartments or turn it into condos or lofts or, and you see a lot of that like back east and, and I think that's going to trickle west. It's already trickling west. And then like we talked about, those government funded jobs are going to be much more appealing because that's where the money's going to be, So I imagine over the next couple of years, while the Class A and the standard kind of new build stuff is going to slow down, which we're already seeing, those government jobs and those kind of more, unique projects where like the adaptive reuse are going to pick up because it's going to just be more appealing. You're going to get a quicker ROI, right? If you adaptive reuse, that might be a 9-month project rather than a 3-year project. So, the more interest accrues, right? So to me, those are all, I think, where the money's starting to go and flow because, the money's still there. It's just, it's sitting on the sidelines. And at a certain point, they're going to start going where it makes sense to invest.
Yeah. Office is super interesting. I'm hoping to get a building at some point.
Yeah.
Discount.
When you're ready, man, I'll come there and we'll adaptive reuse or do whatever to it. That's part of, that's just part of staying connected and having quality contacts and people you trust. It's there.
And we still don't know. I don't think the industry knows the future of office. I think that's still being worked out, right? Because you've got a lot of people in industry, older, boomer generation who are completely against work from home, work remote. And then you've got a whole generation of working age people coming up. They're like, I don't care. I'm just not going to work for you if
Yeah.
that's what you want.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go to the company that gives me the incentives that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it's going to move forward.
Yeah, really, it's interesting because that's part of that pandemic shift that I think I was a work from home guy before that, right? So I've had plenty of opportunities, just kind of at one point I was traveling a lot. So, I mean, I've worked from everywhere. So I was really comfortable working from home, got a great home office, which helps. But I think a lot of people realize that they didn't have to go to work to be productive. And there's so many companies that turn record profits during that time, that they're like, wow, I don't need this office space. And then, like you said, for the employees, it's like, hey, man, I got 2 hours of windshield time that are for free when I can just get up in the morning, brush my teeth, and sit down at a desk. I mean, the appeal is so obvious, and it's happening, right? And there's some big corporations that are like forcing people back into the office, but there's a lot of resistance. And I think they're going to continue to see that. And once again, like you said, the companies that understand that are going to get the most talent. If you're forcing people into the office, there's a lot of people that are going to resist it, and eventually they're not going to be motivated, and then they're going to find somewhere where they can be accommodated. So that's what's happening right now, and if you're not careful, then you'll be caught up in that one.
I can see both sides of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we talked about earlier, setting expectations. If you want to work from home and you're not getting your work done,
I say it all the time. I got people that work well from home, and they don't even got to ask me. Obviously, I like to know, and then I got other people. I'm like, hey man, normally you send 30 emails a day. When you work from home, I got 3. You can't work from home anymore. You're not working. And normally when I have that conversation with them, they say, you're right, bro. I was distracted. I wasn't getting things done.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted at
You know
home.
what I mean? So it's like, it definitely is a skill to work from home. I've had that conversation with plenty of people where they're like, hey man, I'm working from home today, or I'm working remotely. And they're like, I would have never known because I'm actually working, right? So I think that's, once again, being able to tap into that and understand that work from home is not a day off. It just means you get to work from the comfort of your home. And the people that understand that actually get more done from home,
Yeah, if you're, motivated, you like what you do, you like your job, you like your people you work with, you're gonna do it. Although when COVID hit, it did kind of feel like a day off for a while.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I mean, I was in an interesting situation because construction never really stopped. So I mean, I've always kind of had a hybrid workplace just because I'm on site, I'm in the office, I'm at home. Like, it's one of those jobs where you really can't turn it off when you're managing projects. But yeah, I mean, I saw it a lot, man. A lot of people just, coast it for weeks or months, just understanding that there was really no repercussions for it. But, yeah, it's really interesting to see. And that's anything, man. People are going to take advantage if they get an opportunity to take advantage, right? So once again, if that expectation isn't set and there's no accountability, then yeah, I mean, you're kind of just smoke in the wind.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good, man. I mean, I think we do it again another time, but no,
we should definitely do it again.
Yeah, this is fun, man. And, I think it feels organic, man. So I like how you're setting this up, and it feels natural. And, I feel like you got a good start and continue creating content. And, like we talked about, it'll manifest. And before you know it, we'll look back at this one and laugh at it because you'll be somewhere else in a different space and in different, so to me, it's like, it's encouraging to see you pursuing this and stepping out there because, just like we talked about, you're, getting out of your comfort zone. So excited for you, man.
Yeah, they say if you're not embarrassed by your work when you put it out there, then you started too late.
Yeah.
Like, you can't wait to perfect it before you put it out there.
1,000%. No, man. I mean, it's a good setup. I think, for us already being comfortable with each other, I think it makes it easy. But you feel natural. You feel like you're engaged, and nice variety of topics, which is always great. So yeah, I mean, keep going, man. Keep going. Excited for you, bro.
Well, thanks for doing this, coming over and hanging out, having a conversation.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
I think it's a great conversation. I like the concept, and yeah, keep going, bro. Keep going.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you,
too.
man. Yes, sir. To be continued.